got one more guest, one more segment for this week on Bang the Book Radio. That is this week's version of the Odds Report with Brent from DSI Sportsbook. Some new sharp money to talk about for the bowl games, and of course some NFL sharp money to discuss for Week 17. So here is this week's version of the Odds Report with Brent from DSI Sportsbook. All right, I'm joined by Brent, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook for this week's version of the Odds Report. Brent, how's it going today, man?
Going good. It's back in the office after a couple of days off, which is quite nice. It's always dicey around, the holidays and stuff like that in terms of managing staff down here. That's one of the things you have to deal with because you want to give people the time off, but these damn sports just don't stop playing.
No, they really don't. That's definitely the truth here. And we're going to start by going through some of the sharp action that we've talked about on previous segments. Some of those games completed, some of them not. If you remember a couple of weeks back, December 12th, which feels like an eternity. Well, December 13th feels like an eternity ago. We had Buffalo -5, Washington -3, Florida State +5, Georgia State +7.5. And then last week we talked about another round of activity where we once again discussed Liberty +5.5, SMU -3, Illinois +7, Kentucky +3. Obviously, some of those games already in the books here. And you and I were talking before we started recording here that, some of the sharp action didn't go as planned, but some of it did. And, it's just kind of the nature of the beast here in the bowl season.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, Buffalo, we talked about the kind of narrative there was teams who run the ball well, being strong plays in these bowls often because you just kind of matches up. You're talking about conference stats and stuff like that, stuff that really doesn't translate sometimes, but kind of teams who run the ball well, that just carries over regardless of conference play or not. So Buffalo was a good win there. I think that one actually went up to 7. I think we talked about this sharp play was around 4.5 or 5 on that. Went up to 7. Washington was, a solid win as well. Liberty was, I think they were +5.5 and went down to 4.5 or 4 and back up to 5. They ended up winning outright as a dog. And the SMU is really one of the interesting ones for me because, long term, if you're getting the best of the number, based on the assumption that the sharp money is what dictates the market and the moves, if you lay a price like the -3 on SMU and they close 7, just a massive move, and then they get absolutely crushed. They lost 52-28. It's just if you can get the best number over the long term, you're going to succeed. But you have to remember again, even sharp guys, they're content winning something like 58%. I mean, they'll be happy with that. So, I mean, yeah, you're going to get some, rotten apples in the mix, and SMU definitely turned out as one of those.
Well, and that's one of the things we've talked about here on this show too, is that, really the best barometer you have of future success is beating the market, is getting something better than the closing number, and preferably getting something that's, pretty far off of the closing number, because once you lock in that bet, you don't have any control over what happens in that game. Maybe you live bet or something like that, or, you could buy off of a play, middle or hedge, whatever the case may be. But once you get that good number, like SMU -3, at that point, you're at the mercy of the gambling gods. And that one just didn't work out at all for anybody. And again, that was sharp money. That was public money. That was a line adjustment after FAU had some players suspended, and none of it mattered. And sometimes that'll happen, but like you said, over the long term, if you're out in front of that number, you're going to do pretty well.
Yeah, that's kind of like the one kind of key indicator. If you're constantly getting the best of the number, it's basically like if you're paying, say, just if you think about it in terms of a commodity, if you're spending, you're buying something for $1.10, and then a few weeks later, it's all of a sudden the price of that item is now $1.60 or whatever. Well, you do that over the long term, you're ahead of the game, and you kind of have to think of sports betting the same way.
Yeah, you most definitely do. And we got some new sharp action to talk about here on the Bulls side of things. We'll actually start with an afternoon game on Friday. So hopefully our listeners getting in on this segment quickly, as they often do. I know this is one of the most anticipated segments of the week. The Pinstripe Bowl, game 229, 230, Michigan State and Wake Forest. Kind of an interesting handicap here.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan State, right off the bat is where the sharp money came in. And again, we talked about the moves and how they come in earlier shows, and especially with these bowls, because these numbers come out so far in advance. I mean, you tend to get early grabs on prices and stuff like that. Sometimes you get in, public money that just jumps into the market thinking that the price is going to move, or they just love a number and they jump on that. Other times it takes a while. It's kind of like for the sharp money, kind of like the cream to rise to the top, if you will. And it has in this game here. The Michigan State, I think, it initially opened up at -3.5. Excuse me, got bet down actually with, a public money mostly just on Wake Forest grabbing the +3. Lo and behold, boom, it's got up to 3.5 again, and now we're at -4. Sharp money did bet Michigan State when it touched 3, so the sharp money is there. And you look at these teams in terms of records and stuff like that. We talked about this, when we started our bowl segment, in that it's very difficult to handicap these teams a lot of times because you're talking about stats and these things that are based on conference play, and now you're talking about non-conference teams and teams who play maybe a completely different style within their own conference and how those match up. You're also talking about the strength of these, the conferences that these teams are in. Michigan State, only comes into the bowl game at 6-6, but they play in the Big Ten, obviously a tough conference.
All right, so we jump ahead here to Saturday, and we talk about the Cotton Bowl, game 239-240, Memphis and Penn State. And this is a very interesting game because you've got a great group of 5 team in Memphis. You've got a power conference team in Penn State that, they lost to Ohio State. And other than that, they were pretty good here over the course of the season. What's going on with the Cotton Bowl?
Yeah, that's a good example. I mean, look, just at records. I mean, Memphis. I mean, that's 12-1. That's really impressive. They did beat a ranked team in Navy. They also played Cincinnati twice, who's like a top 20, top 25 team, and they beat them twice. So they have some decent wins on their ledger. They lost to Temple, I guess, which kind of set them back, obviously. But Penn State -6.5 in this one is where the sharp money came in. We're at 7 right now. I've got a count of about 3-1 favoring Penn State, so I've got kind of like public money going that way as well. And again, Penn State is one of the more brand name teams out there. You talk about Penn State or Memphis. I mean, who's the more recognizable team out there in the market? Amongst public player bettors and stuff like that. And obviously, Penn State fits that mold. So kind of no surprise to that. My wager count has gone that way as well. Since I've gone up to -7, I've actually still got more Penn State money. So the public is still betting Penn State to account about 3-1, even at 7. So it's just a constant flood of Penn State money. I do see some 7-15s out there right now, so I'm kind of hanging at 7. But I'm more inclined right now to go 7.5, and if that doesn't work for you, we might have to go. Or sorry, 7 -15. If that doesn't work, we may be forced to go to 7.5. Penn State, they got some decent wins on their season, of course, in terms of beating Iowa and Michigan. A couple of big wins for them. Losing to Iowa State, obviously, no harm in that, and they lost, to Minnesota as well. Both very close games. So I mean, you kind of have a good idea in terms of the level that Penn State's at, and this is going to be a big test for Memphis, even though they're 12-1.
So do you feel like maybe there was some sort of sharp action in the market on Memphis that bumped this to 6.5?
No, I mean, it did open, maybe too high. I'm looking at, what I got at 6.5. Even for me, it was still Penn State money at that. So it's just all Penn State money from what I've seen. That initial bump down, it could have been a value grab. I think it did open as high as 7.5 out there. Now I didn't open higher than 7. That's as high as I opened and did tick down. But 7.5, I think, is the highest opening number out there, and it's like the early number. And that probably was a price grab, and it could be a guy who's, that we talked about before, how you really have to profile your players. It could be, it happened at another book, so I can't really comment for sure, but it could be someone just grabbing the 7.5, thinking the number's going to drop down. When it goes to 6.5, they play it back the other way. That stuff happens all the time.
Especially in the bowl season where you got a lot of time for things to sort of settle in, a lot of time for action to come in on these games. We jump ahead to the first day of 2020. That would be January 1st. Game 269-270. Baylor and Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. This one's actually, I'm seeing 4.5s out there in the market now as we're recording.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, as of today, we're doing this on Thursday, and you see as low as 4.5 on Georgia or as high as 5.5. I think earlier today there was even a 6 out there that might be hanging around on Georgia. So it's really, again, you're talking about, we don't have quite as much time. We're, about a week away from these games. But still, you're talking about, you still got a week away, and there's still, these numbers have been up there for a long time. And you kind of, within each sports book, you're kind of looking at your own exposure and where a number settles. So if someone who's using 6 on this game just might happen to have a whole lot of, a Georgia money. And it can also be a case where, there's different philosophies in terms of how you're going to book. The aggressive 4.5s out there might be books where they want to balance action regardless of what the cost. There's other books out there who might take a stance on a number. And like, for example, we, in-house, I've got a wager count of about 2-1, almost 3-1 favoring Georgia. So to me, that indicates books out there are getting public money on Georgia. So, if a book's got heavy public money out on Georgia and they haven't been hit by sharp money on Baylor, they're probably going to stay at the 5.5 and juice, or even the -6 that I see out there right now. A place that's going to be aggressive and really try and balance their action. Even if they got hit on Baylor +7, which is where the sharp money came, they might be down a 4.5, just trying to fish and get something back. Personally, we're sitting at Georgia -5. I took sharp money on Baylor +7. Baylor is quite interesting. I mean, their only loss was to Oklahoma, who's number 4. I think they lost them twice. That's why they got the 2 losses on their record on the season. But they're kind of Baylor's. They've been scrappy and they've just been in so many games. I mean, talk about the losses to Oklahoma. I think they lost by 3 and 7 those 2 games. So they don't have a real brand name win other than beating Oklahoma State, but they've been a real, a tough team who hangs with a lot of other, good teams, and they're in a tough conference, of course. Georgia, on the other hand, of course, they lost to LSU, but I mean, they lost, quite handily to LSU. Also on this game, we do have sharp money on the total. That was under 43. Number opened at 42.5, I think it was, and got bet up to 43 right away. Then got, as soon as they hit 43, got bet under. We're down to 41 right here. And I kind of get that as well. I mean, you got a couple of decent defensive teams. Georgia's been in a lot of low-scoring games, and of course the correlation of the dog and the under goes well. In addition to the play that was on Georgia +7.
So, I mean, as you're interpreting this, and obviously Georgia, does have some offensive line injuries, so there are some cluster concerns there with protecting the quarterback and in the running game. Is this a setup to kind of keep pushing this number down a little bit? Is this a true sharp versus public split? What do you think?
I think this is a true sharp versus public split. Yeah, I think this number is going to bounce around basically where it is right now. I mean, I'm sorry not to to shed any real light on that, but I mean the highest number like I see out there right now is -6 on Georgia. The lowest number is -4.5. And I think that's it comes down to as well. Like I said, you get a lot of reflection in your bookmaking philosophies in terms of what number you're using. Like I said, I've got a wager count. Even at 6.5 was slightly more Georgia money, but pretty much even at 6, I had more Georgia bets as well. But I'm of the position where I want to be on the side of sharp money. That's why we're down to 5.
All right, so we circle back here to December 28th, where we've got avalanches of money on the college football playoff semifinals. Nothing super sharp in-house for you, which is why we're going to talk about these games last year. But obviously with the 2 marquee matchups coming up this weekend, wanted to make sure we talked about them. We start with the Peach Bowl, which is 241, 242, Oklahoma and LSU. Seems like the song remains the same on this game for now, Brent.
Yeah, I mean, my count is about 3-1 favoring LSU. I know some books out there have touched like 14, dog 15, or what have you, or 13.5 seems to be pretty much the consensus number out in the market, which is where I am as well. Again, we've got a few days in advance of this one, and once it shot up to like 13.5, the numbers really held strong there. I mean, last week we talked about this; it was still 13.5. Even at 13.5, though, I still have a count, like I said, of about 3-1 favoring LSU. My count is that high, but my money really, in-house, it's a manageable figure for me right now. So one thing is looking at your wager count, and one thing is looking at your actual dollar volume exposure. So I'm pretty set on this game right now at 13.5. If I can avoid go to 14, I'm going to do that. If other books start creeping up, I'll certainly go up there with them. Total, same thing. I mean, we're sitting at 76 right now. Numbers are open at 77.5. Took initial bets on the under. My wager count on the under is 2-1, almost 3-1 favoring the under as well. So I've kind of just gone down with the market down to 76 from the opener of 77.
Well, and of course, we did see some sharp involvement right away when this thing opened, kind of bumping it up, not necessarily at DSI, but out there in the market, kind of driving this line up a little bit. So again, for our listeners out there, if this number starts coming down, it would be a good indicator of sharp Oklahoma money.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my count is like I said, it's quite one-sided favoring LSU. Even 12.5, 13, even at 13.5, it's LSU money. So I'm you definitely, if you're looking out there right now, the numbers pretty much consensus across the board is 13.5. Maybe if you want to justify 13.5 minus 15 and call that the consensus number, that would be accurate. I couldn't argue with that. So if this number does come down, it's definitely going to be sharp money that drives it.
All right, so the next one, 243, 244, the Fiesta Bowl, Clemson and Ohio State, the second of the college football playoff semifinals. And this number is still not really moving a whole lot either.
Yeah, it's just been, the initial opener, I think even the highest number I saw out there initially, that was like the first place ever that opened the number was Ohio State -1.5. And it was like within 10, 15 minutes, it was like -2 and 2.5 on Clemson. That number, it did touch 2.5, and like most books pretty much, settled on 2.5. And then you just kind of seen week after week, just a slow trickle back down of what I think is influential Ohio State money coming into the market. The number is, I'm using 2. I know there's some of the, the big respectable books out there as well who are using 1.5 on Clemson. So this is kind of slowly creeping back down. I mean, the initial move from Ohio State being favored to Clemson being favored was very, very sharp and very, very quick. Now it's trickling back down the other way. And, when we talk about people middling games and stuff like that, that applies to money line bets as well. I mean, if you're sitting on, Clemson at even money for a big bet, and now you can get, say, +110 on the money line the other way with Ohio State, people definitely will do that if they've got enough, enough financial involvement in that. Personally, in terms of what I've seen count-wise, I'm about 2-1. No, I'm going to call it 3-1 on Clemson. So even at like -2.5, I had about 2-1 count favoring Clemson. At -2, I'm about 3-1 favoring Clemson. So the money's just, still coming in on Clemson, but the number's trickling down.
So your pulse on this game is a sharp public split right now, and do you think that continues?
Yeah, I think Clemson is going to continue to get public money. I don't have any doubt in that at all. If this number comes down even towards a pick'em, that's definitely sharp money that's going to be out there involved. And I think it's already come in on Ohio State, coming down from 2.5 to 2 on the books out there that are 1.5. That's definitely influential money that came as well on Ohio State.
Well, it should be a lot of fun to watch. And again, as we talked about on Thursday's edition of the show, I mean, this semifinal looks absolutely outstanding. Should write a lot of action on it and should be a really, really good game here on Saturday night between Clemson and Ohio State. We transition over to the NFL side of the spectrum here for Week 17. And, as I look up and down this card, Brent, and I don't know if the handle that you've got so far reflects this, I'm having a real hard time figuring out what's what in Week 17 with trying to figure out if these teams care, trying to figure out all the different playoff scenarios. Are you seeing a lower than average handle for Week 17?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look out there, really, I think the Seahawks and the Niners, I think that might be like the only game where both teams are really playing for seeding. And of course, the situation with Seattle is a mess in terms of what they've gone through with their running backs. I mean, they've turned the clock back to bring back, I guess, Turbin and Lynch as well are their running backs now. Plus I don't know if it's a rookie they had who stepped in last week, but they just had a mess on the offensive side of the ball with respect to their running backs. There's a couple themes that always kind of hold through year after year, and popular theory is or trend is divisional rematches, betting the unders in those games, and that's kind of held true as well. I think if you look at the divisional rematch games that are out there, almost every game, almost not every single game has gone, trended towards the under. I think Miami and New England might be one exception to that, and maybe Green Bay, I think, is the other one out there. But pretty much looking across the board, the numbers have all ticked down in these rematch games. And you look at the volatility of the market too, because you're talking about teams who have nothing to play for. Are they going to rest players? Are they not going to rest players? I think Baltimore has no need to win. Buffalo, their status doesn't change. Houston is 3 or 4 regardless of what happens to whether they win or not. It depends on other teams. Minnesota, same thing. I think they're locked in. Dallas, they obviously need to win. Philadelphia needs to win. Oakland still has somehow they have a shot. If you move the abacus around right, I think Oakland still has a chance. Of course, Pittsburgh still has a chance in Tennessee as well. So that there's kind of that narrative in terms of the teams needing to win. There's also there's player stuff that you get involved in as well. And again, we have to expand this to player props and stuff like that. Something probably doesn't come up very often, but you got these players who are looking for either bonuses or to meet some mark in terms of this rushing yards. You've got like Mixon, for example, for Cincinnati. I think he's like 25 yards away from 1,000 yards. Lindsey for Denver, he's around there as well. You're talking about receivers just short of 1,000 yards. So all these kind of things get played up a lot. One real interesting thing you find as well is the information in the market and the reaction to that. You see all these moves that are related to information and different narratives. I mean, you look at the Tennessee Houston game is just a crazy one. I think that number opened like around a pick or -1 with Houston or Tennessee, sorry. And then they announced that Houston was probably going to rest their starters. Now, it wasn't actually Houston's coach who said that. And that number went up to, I think it went all the way up to 6.5. Tennessee was favored by -6.5 versus Houston. Then they talked to O'Brien, the coach himself, and he said, I never said I was going to rest starters. And boom, you've got a number going from 6.5 down to 4.5 down to 3.5 where we are right now. It's just crazy, the volatility this week in the season.
Well, and not even that, but also the fact that, some of these games, and the NFL has done a better job of it here this season, but sometimes they can't help it. Sometimes they've got a game at 1 that means something and that will impact the game it's on at 4, something like that. So that happens all the time where you've got to be vigilant in terms of, hey, if this team clinches a spot, well, in that 4:00 game, they're not playing for anything. So, that happens all the time here in week 17 too.
Yeah, the NFL has done a much better job from our perspective in terms of managing that. They've changed, years ago, they never changed times on these games that were scheduled the way they were. And so you were, as a defense mechanism, you had to either take games off the board once the early game started or reduce limits and stuff like that. Now they've done the NFL has done a much better job of kind of matching up games starting at the same time that, kind of mean something within each other. Like, Dallas, Washington is on at the same time as Philadelphia and the Giants, and, they're on. Also, of course, the Sunday night game is San Fran and Seattle, so that's a great game to have standing alone by itself as well.
Well, despite the mess that is Week 17 in the NFL, we do have some sharp action to discuss here. Beginning with game 103-104, the battle for Ohio, the battle of I-71, Cleveland and Cincinnati. Browns still a road favorite down in the Queen City, but no longer a road favorite of 3 at most places.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a battle between a 6-9 Browns team and a 1-14 Bengals team. I think they are. I mean, it's just like, hey, Cincinnati comes in having lost probably 3 in a row, and I know Cleveland's lost a couple in a row as well. So I don't know how much of a battle it is. This number has gone down there. My count, I'll tell you right away, is about just slightly more than 2-1 favoring the Browns, but this number has come down from the 3 down to the 2.5 and juice where it is right now. This is probably the only game this week where it's really a sharp and public split. And it's strange just because the public, even dating back to halfway through last year when Baker Mayfield came in, it's just been constant Brown support. And they did kind of shy away from a bit during the season when they had their troubles. But with Beckham there and Mayfield drawing the attention, they've been a very, very public team this season. So the fact that they're 6-9, they've probably done sportsbooks quite well. I talked about as well. These are divisional rematch games, so totals have been getting bet down. This one opened at 46, is down to 43.5. But the only thing I have sharp on this one is Cincinnati +3. I think that's one of the more tried and true examples of this week where it's a definite sharp money moving that number down.
Imagine sharp money out of a 1-win team in week 17. But that's what we've got here,
Yeah,
so
well, I think they've locked up the first draft pick, right? So yes. if they win, they don't ruin anything. So it's okay, they're going to go out there and they're actually going to try and win this game.
Yeah, that's certainly what it seems like. It's certainly what the market is suggesting. So again, for people, because also too, people are going to walk into this game and go, Cincinnati's got 1 win and I can get the Browns under a field goal. It looks too good to be true. I don't know how this game plays out, but generally speaking, if it looks too good to be true in this business, it probably is.
Yeah, when you see a number like that, and if you just if you have the perception, and the market has the perception of Cincinnati being just a horrible team, and I think they've played better with Dalton at the helm and stuff like that. But I think too, you kind of have to look at the Browns and the trouble they've had. It's not just personnel in terms of chemistry and stuff like that. They just haven't played very very well this season. So it is kind of. You look at numbers and when something like you said looks too good to be true, you kind of have to dig a little bit further and say, okay, what's the real story behind this?
All right, from one week 17 pillow fight to another, game 107-108 here in the AFC South is Indianapolis and Jacksonville. Looks like we're starting to get some more Indianapolis money out there, kind of driving this one up, but it is the total that's gotten sharp action in-house for you.
Yeah, this one we got sharp money on the under 44.5 is where this one came, sitting at 40. I'm at 43 right now. There's 42.5s out there, so I'm probably going to dip down if the market goes that way. Again, it's just one of those ugly games, and you're talking about teams who you have to win and don't have to win and stuff like that. Well, Jacksonville obviously hasn't had to win for a long time. I've got a wager count just on the side of about 4-1 favoring the Colts, so that's kind of what's driven this number in terms of the side. I also have a count favoring the over about 2-1, which I kind of find surprising just because I don't know how you can really bet the Jacksonville offense, in a game that's over. But truth be told, their defense, which is kind of like their backbone before, just hasn't been very good this year either. So the Colts, coming in here at 7-8. And Jacksonville 5-10. Again, I think this is just kind of goes back to the old theme of divisional rematches going under. I think the Colts won this one. I think they scored like 46 points in the first meeting of this one. But it's open, like I said, this one opened up at 44.5 and still attracted sharp under money.
All right, so we jumped down to a game in the NFC South here. New Orleans and Carolina, game 113, 114, and man, we've got some really big road numbers this week. New Orleans laying 13 at Carolina. Green Bay laying 12.5 or 13 at Detroit. This is kind of the nature of the beast here in week 17, and this one's actually even gone up.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things as well as you want to make a number. What number's high enough but not too high. This number, I have a feeling this number is probably going to hit 13.5 and maybe even 14. I'm at minus 13 right now. Sharp money came in on the Saints at minus 11. So I just think that number is going to keep on coming in. It's crazy with the Saints too. I mean, yes, this is a must-win game for them, or they need to win, to improve their position. But you're looking at them. I think they're 12-3 right now. They won a couple of games in a row now. You've got San Francisco and Green Bay as well. If San Francisco and Green Bay both win, New Orleans finishes the year 13-3, assuming they win this game here, and they still end up with a number 3 seed. It's just like, it just seems kind of like unfair. Like you go 13-3 and you're a 3 seed. That just seems wrong. This is partly probably a play against Carolina as well, in terms of the fact that their quarterback play is all season long has been kind of iffy. They've lost. I was shocked when I looked at this stats. I think it said they've lost 7 in a row. Carolina has. That's just. Kind of the number things kind of creep up on you. I don't know. For me myself, I just didn't think of Carolina as being that bad of a team. But lo and behold, they have lost 7 straight games. For me, even since I've gone to 13, I'm still getting a wager count of about 2-1 favoring New Orleans. So I think this one's going to tick up.
13-3 and you're a 3 seed. 8-8 and you're a 4 seed. So hopefully that's something that, and the problem is I don't know what the solution is outside of, teams just playing better in the NFC East, but that is one of the tough things, man. You're going to be 13-3 and get a home game. You're going to be 8-8 and get a home game in the wild card round. So
yeah, it's almost
crazy.
Like, you talk about like the Dallas and Philadelphia as we are, and it's like you've got to have they should have a rule, like if you want to win your division, you need to you've got to have a winning record. Otherwise, we bump you down to if the wild card's got a better record than you, there's got to be something like that. I mean, yeah, okay, we'll let you in the playoffs, but you got to do a whole lot better.
No, I completely agree with that. Team that's doing very, very well here of late, the Kansas City Chiefs, game 125, 126. Chargers and Chiefs here in an AFC West matchup. And once again, that theme that you kind of talked about here, the divisional rematch, we're seeing sharp money as a result.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of one of the themes that has again, if you go through every divisional game this week, I think every divisional rematch game here, the total's been bet under. Again, it's kind of an under trend that has had success. There are a couple that have stayed the same, but I don't think any of them have gone higher. Again, maybe Miami, New England might be the exception to that. But this, I kind of think this is a play, beyond just a trend. Obviously, the sharp money goes with. I think it's kind of just market wide. I think the perception of Kansas City's defense not being very good is still out there. But if you look at the numbers, I think it's a very underrated, solid Kansas City defense. Offensively, I mean, you look at what Kansas City's been through. I mean, they've gone from a 7-point favorite in this game, or 7.5, all the way up to -9. Their running backs, I mean, it's just been a mess all season long, yet they still get it done. They've won 5 in a row, and their defense, I think, has really been, a big key to that. These teams obviously played each other before. Rivers was 28 out of 52 with 4 interceptions. So, you kind of look at whenever your quarterback's got to throw the ball 52 times, that means you're probably not doing very well. And he threw 4 of those to the wrong team as well. There is some kind of news came out about Rivers' thumb, having him limited in practice this week. I don't think that affected the total, just because of the fact that Rivers, there's just no way in what, could possibly be Rivers' last game, or his last game for the Chargers at least. There's just no way that he's not going to be out there. So we're pretty certain that Rivers is going to play despite the thumb issue. I've got a wager count about 2-1 favoring the under as well. Sharp money on this came in at under 48, and right across the board, this one's painted 45.5.
Real quickly here, just because it's the only game that matters for both teams, some thoughts on San Francisco, Seattle, 129-130. San Francisco opened a small road favorite up to 3.5 now. Very rare territory for Seattle to be a home dog and to be a home dog of this magnitude. Do you think we get some sharp money on Seattle as we get closer to the game, or is this just going to stay, with a lot of San Francisco tickets?
No, I think this one's pretty much going to stay where it is. I mean, I actually, in-house, looking at my count, my major count on this one's almost dead even. I think the number, like the right number, is where it is right now with San Francisco, like -3, -20, or perhaps 3.5, dog 20, something like that. I think with the running back situation with Seattle and, the whole mess of their backfield, this seems like it, the move, was the right move to 3 where it is right now. I'm sitting at 3. I think I'm probably going to hold on to that number as much as I can. Like I said, at 3, I do have some, buy points and stuff like that with Seattle plus 3.5. So, at plus 3.5, I'm almost 2-1 favoring Seattle. At -3 with the juice, I'm almost 2-1 favoring San Francisco. That's where I get, my impression is that this number is going to hang where it is.
Well, sounds like a good spot for you here in the final NFL game for 2019. Brent, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook. Always a treat to chat with you, man. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you again next year.
Yeah, it should be a fantastic weekend. I'm looking forward to all these, these bowl games. Now it's a more fun time of the year. You kind of get the, the better teams involved in there. No offense to teams like Liberty and Buffalo and stuff like that, but this is going to be an exciting week and weekend.
Well, it's something I do want to clarify real quickly. By next year, I mean next week on the show. So we can talk about the NFL playoffs, not next season, just so our listeners out there don't go panicking. But Brent, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. And again, we'll talk to you next week.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Adam.